Welcome to LOA Today. I'm Walt Thiessen.
With me today is life coach and LOA teacher Joel Elston.
This is your daily dose of happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today.
Okay, so we've agreed we're going to start off with the idea that we have a topic related to another topic we're going to do, but it's not the same topic, even though I kind of see a lot of overlap between them, but you're not really seeing the same level of overlap. And I'm not even cluing the audience in. I got to clue the audience in first. So
I think that would be helpful because we're starting off.
Right, yeah. I mean, Jen came up with the topic of preparation, and we got the link from Jen late for doing the show. And so you reached out to me and said, where's the link? I said, I don't know. So I created a link with a show topic that I just made up off the top of my head, which is, where are we going? I figured, it's kind of an open-ended question. We could do a lot of fun with that. And then I made the comment that they're pretty much the same thing. Well, you pointed out, but they're really not really the same thing. And okay, yeah, I'll give you that. They're not really the same thing. But there's a fair amount of overlap in there, because you have to prepare before you can even, go where you're going. And you have to know where you're going before you can prepare. I mean, they kind of go hand in hand.
Or they don't. And which I love to be.
Okay, I'm waiting for this one.
Well, so when I first heard the topics, where I was going with that, so where you're going matches the concept for me. There is no destination. There's a journey. Your journey is where you're going. There is no destination. I think preparation indicates you're preparing a specific place to go. So that was that's how I saw it. So, but
all right, yeah. I can see that. That's fair enough. But we both responded well to that off the topic.
I love the topic because one of my big discoveries, and I talk about this also on social media, and we have on the show before, that I think we all are conditioned to believe there's a destination. We're working for something. It's retirement, you whatever that destination is. And when you get to the destination, you realize the destination was never the point. The destination is sort of a carrot to make the journey happen. And that's how I see it. And so
I would call it a milestone, actually. I mean, we do have goals. That's what goals really are all about. They're about, here's the next milestone I want to reach. Here's the next goal line I want to reach. But just like in a football game, you cross the goal line. Well, that doesn't mean the game ends. You want to cross the goal line again and again.
Yeah. And so in my view of all of this, and there's always another step. There's what is that? So when I started getting frustrated that my destination, my assumption of destination, which was building wealth, preparing one day for retirement, and due to my gambling addiction, a lot of stuff had happened. That process didn't seem to be remotely working, and I was becoming frustrated that, man, I don't know if I'll ever get that destination. I don't know if it's achievable for me, because I was so late in starting. And along the way, I realized there were a lot of plot twists and things in pursuit of that destination that were actually pretty exciting. And so one thing led to another, to another, to another. And that's when I just had the epiphany one time. And it might have been on during a therapeutic psilocybin trip, maybe, that the idea that, it really came to me. There is no destination. It's an illusion. It could be a goal. It could be whatever you want to call it. But the idea that we're moving towards something allows the catalyst to happen. So, me starting out in Florida, where everything fell apart, then having to go to South Carolina, and some crazy chain of events puts me in Virginia, and there's a million, the story, there's a million impossible synchronicities that go with that. And so I've had an incredible life when you look at the journey. I've had the wildest journey imaginable.
True enough.
So when I learned to appreciate the journey, and I don't, my understanding, my journey, when I stop breathing, my journey here on this planet ends. That's where it is. There's never going to be a day where I say, oh, thank God I made it. It's not that's not going to be my world. It's going to be what's next, what's going forward, as much as, that's just how I view life. So I think the preparation part, there's a lot of people that are taught really early to start preparing. And the message could get lost, and preparation isn't wrong. But when you ignore the part of the journey that's the most valuable, the preparation becomes distracting.
I think it's a fair evaluation of it. I would even go so far as to say that the preparation piece is unfair. And the reason I say it's unfair isn't because there's anything unfair intrinsically in preparation. It's that, like you said, you're told, you're given the assignment, be prepared, prepare yourself. But they rarely have any idea of how to teach you how to prepare. Or if they do teach you how to prepare, what they're teaching you is either wrong or counterproductive, like 90% of the time. So you can't even trust that. So the question at that point becomes, well, how do you prepare when you don't even know what you're preparing for, or how you're going to prepare to get there?
That's so point. And I often state, and it is funny when I say this, but it's very accurate. I'm always comically unprepared.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah.
Life has happened to me. Everything that happened, I wasn't remotely prepared for what happened. I was so far unprepared. I was the opposite of prepared. But yet it still worked out in an incredible manner. And I would also go further to say my unpreparedness is actually part of what made it so exciting.
Yeah. Yeah. And to add into what you were talking about earlier about how it's the journey, when we were talking about not just having a goal to reach, but also how it's really not about the goal being the end destination. One of the first thoughts that came into my mind was a horse race, which is probably not the best example to come up to, to talk to an ex-gambling addict, but nevertheless, it's still a useful analogy to bring up, because from the point of view of the racehorse, of a thoroughbred racehorse, right, who's in a race, they don't see a finish line. Right. We see finish lines. We see finish lines on the screen or on the TV or whatever. The horse doesn't see it. All the horse sees is this long extended track. That's it. They have no idea where the finish line is. And I often thought about that, and I said to myself, well, if they don't know where the finish line is, how do they know when they win? And of course, the answer is their idea of a win is a different idea.
And it's the same as humans. We don't know when the finish line is. Some people's finish line happens when they're 23.
Yeah.
Some people finish line happens when they're 105. And one of the, I almost say great things, but one of the intriguing things about life is there on any given moment, any given day, you never know. And I'm not saying that in a negative way. I'm just simply saying that's what makes it go. That's what the appreciation, the daily journey, the strengthening process, that when I embraced that the journey was I'm not going to go from being homeless and $250,000 in credit card debt, convicted felon, all these other things, to being wealthy. That was not a one-day event. I'm not going to switch that gear.
It would have been nice and easy if it was a one-day event.
It would have been wonderful. I mean, and I worked on that theory for a while, but it just never came about. But when I just accepted that, okay, the only way I'm going to get there, and that was when I was still, sort of destination based, is I just got to get busy and moving and get movement and got to work my way up. The convicted felon doesn't have many job opportunities early. So I just had to do whatever was necessary that led me to the next thing, that led me to the next thing. And that when I really started to appreciate the journey and I really started to look forward to the plot twist and, all those things, life became so much more just fulfilling because I'm living the journey. And I'm sure people think just because I do what I do for a living that probably you say this, but I really appreciate every day. I mean, I sincerely appreciate every day. I enjoy talking to people. I enjoy I have this great life. I authentically talk to different people every day, not just in my practice, but at my gym and places like that. So I have a life that I love, and I just view every day as part of that journey. Now, there's some things that will happen on this journey that I'm not really excited about, but nonetheless, it's going to be part of the journey.
Right. Yeah. And the fact that it's part of a journey is it's not an oh, but it's an and but. It's like, this is not something that I'm putting up with. This is part of it. Even if it's not something that I'm crazy about at the moment, in the long run, I still love it. That's a lesson I learned from you, by the way. I remember the very first time you explained to me how the best thing that ever happened to you was basically becoming an addict living off of the streets of Las Vegas, eating out of a dumpster, going to jail rather, and then coming out the other side and discovering against all the odds that your life was turning around. but that crash and burn moment was the best thing that ever happened. You don't want it to happen again, but it was the best thing that ever happened. And I remember distinctly when you were telling me that here on the show. You actually explained it a few times because it took a while to sink in. I didn't believe it the first few times. I thought you were nuts. I couldn't imagine how you'd actually want that.
Yeah, there's no, to be clear, as you said, I don't want it, but the fact that it did happen, it required a set of, I had to develop I dug myself an incredibly deep hole. And the process of digging myself out of the hole is what made me successful. I don't know I would be, if I would have just stayed working for my dad in the insurance agency years ago, which the absolute most boring job on the planet, it's so.
I'm not even sure you'd be alive if you'd done it.
I probably would. Seriously, it was, I was depressed and I'm not making excuses. My dad made a great living and supported us well in that business, but I just wasn't built for that business with my ADHD. Right. And so it wasn't something that I felt was sustainable. And so having lost everything and losing jobs and the process taught me that when it happened in my early 30s, I was much more prepared to handle the physical, like being homeless or going to jail or those things. If I had to do all that, I would expect I would do it again. But the fact I've done it once, that's plenty. I've researched it, that kind of thing. But years later, and you were a part of this, and you at least witnessed it. So years later, when I was working at Williamsville Wellness, and that's when you and I first met when I was working there. I came up to Richmond to basically retire at that company. It was a company that I dreamed of, and that was, So with all that being said, I had a big argument with the boss, and I was there for 5 years, and on one Saturday morning, I was unemployed. Now, the difference between the homeless time and the other stuff, I had plenty of money saved up.
Yeah, slight difference there, yeah.
Yeah, and also I had a literal belief, not even a question, that this would be a catalyst to something better. Because what I knew is, while I loved working with my clients and at the job, I hated the politics. I hated working with my boss, even though him and I are friends now. He's just one of the most rageful people I ever worked with. Managing the annoying therapist, all those things that are going on there. And so I actually the law of attraction created that separation. And so I knew it. I never questioned it. There wasn't a moment of sleepless nights. There wasn't, it was simply, well, let me take a couple weeks off and I literally said, it'll work out.
And not only did it work out, it worked out in spades.
Yeah, it worked out far greater than I could. And I didn't even have a plan at that point. I just said, let's just see what happens. And it happened in a way that just blew me away. And everybody in my orbit said, I just can't believe you bounced from that. My mom was alive back then. And when I lost that job, she said, can you call him back and beg for your job back? And I'm like,
I remember when you told me that, yeah.
Yeah. And I said, no. And she said, well, I don't know if you'll ever make that much money again.
Well, Mom, I think you've learned the answer on that one.
Yeah. So, and to give her credit, my mom always had a fear-based life. So she wasn't trying to be somebody was sabotaging. She was just simply very concerned. She said, you have kids and you have responsibilities. Yeah. And I said, don't worry, Mom, I trust the process. And it did. So to me, the where you're going, I still don't know. I love it. I have no earthly clue where I'm going. I know where I'm at right now. I love where I'm at right now, but I still expect many more things to happen.
As you were talking there, I was kind of flashing back a moment ago to what we were talking about regarding what I'd call milestones. If they're not final and finish lines, they're just marks along the way. And that's often the way that in life we talk about how we appreciate stuff that goes on. And it's a great way to appreciate things. Appreciating milestones is really valuable. But I've also found something else, and that is the milestone actually isn't all that important to me. Like, for instance, I have this this AI project I'm working on. I call it AI Gather. I'm basically building a chat room for AIs to work on projects at the behest of a human. And in the process of doing that, I've learned a lot about AI, but I've also gotten a lot of feedback from AI in that as we're building this thing out, as we're writing the software and so forth, we come to what would typically be called milestones. And the AI almost always point out to me, hey, this is a great milestone we just reached. And I notice it, and I give it like 1 second of appreciation. Yeah, that's true. And my mind is immediately on to, wow, what comes next?
Yeah.
For the exact reason you just described.
Absolutely.
Because where are we going? We don't know where we're going. That's the way I am with I have some idea of where I want to go with this project. I have some idea of what the final thing I want it to look like. But the next step, I don't know what that next step's going to look like. I have some ideas,
Sure.
I have some hopes, I have some thoughts, but I don't really know how it's going to look, how we're going to get there, how many bends in the road we're going to have to go through to get to it. And I can hardly wait to find out what they are.
And that's the that's the concepts that we're sort of supporting that idea. The embracing the uncertainty, embracing the process, knowing the process is going to include failure, it's going to include misdirection, it's going to include all those things are going to happen, and that's part of the process. You're not scared of that. You're
Yeah.
excited about it, because
Yeah.
even with a failure, that just tells you to go a different direction or tweak it a certain way.
Well,
And
more than that, one of the things that I think people get hung up on, I know because I used to get hung up on it in a really big way, is if I haven't gotten there yet, if I haven't gotten the goal I'm looking for, I would get very, very frustrated and impatient about it. And I think probably most of human population today can experience that because of how many people are looking for instant gratification on all kinds of stuff. So it's a very familiar concept to most of us, and I would say even perhaps to all of us. And yet, that also has, this is going to sound strange, but I know it won't sound strange to you, but it's going to sound strange to many listeners. There's a positive side to that instant gratification thing. Because the instant gratification, if you look at it more positively, is I can't wait for the next thing to happen. Literally, I can't wait. Like, I want it right now. I want to find out what the next thing is going to be right now. I don't want to wait 5 minutes from now. I don't want to wait 10 minutes. And so my impatience, yeah, it's partly, when am I going to get to that goal line I'm aiming at? But it's more like, when am I going to get the result of what I'm doing right now? I don't even want to wait 30 seconds. I want to find out right now. That's the level of impatience, if you want to call it,
sure,
that I deal with. But that impatience drives me forward. It doesn't hold me back. That's the difference.
Well, it's similar to any descriptive. When you hear, usually instant gratification is describing someone who's not process. They're constantly stuck, and it's usually almost always a negative connotation, which is being discussed.
Right.
But it's like anything else. It's like my definition of failure. It's failing is the ultimate learning process. The brain's more neuroplastic. I seek failure every day. I seek failure. So when people hear that, they're going, "What?" And no, failure instructs for me. Failure is it's a benchmark. It's a goal. It measures where I'm at. I'm not going to quit, but failure is just is something that makes me go harder. Instant gratification can be something that keeps people from ever being really productive, but it also can have a very productive moment as well. Really, so it's like ADHD. ADHD is not necessary. It's not a deficit of attention. It's an abundance of attention and where you're directing it. So ADHD for me is the value is, if I don't like something is boring to me, I can't focus. I don't care. It's not because I'm not capable. I just don't care. If it's something that I'm into, I can literally do a 10-hour deep dive and not take a break. It's what I do. So ADHD comes with abundance of attention, but learning how to control where to direct it is the problem, or not the problem. It's what the situation.
And similarly, when I'm looking for when is this next thing that I'm working on going to be done, and I don't want to wait 30 seconds. I want to wait right now. That drives me forward so much that, like you were saying, I can do that for 10 hours a day. The biggest problem I have is tearing myself away from it.
Yes.
Which is actually very important to mental and emotional health. I have to make sure I pull myself away from it, because I literally can focus on that to my detriment. I can exhaust myself. I can flush all the emotion out of myself. I can just drain myself until there's nothing left by driving myself that way. So I do have to know to pull back. I do have to know to say, okay, here's my line. Talk about having a line. Here's my line today. I'm not going to go past this line because I need my mental health.
Yes. Yeah.
It's just a different kind of line. It's a different kind of, it's not a resistance about the thing happening. It's a resistance about not stopping going after the thing that I want to happen.
Sure. Well, with anything we're doing, the idea of being passionate about, being pursue
Mm,
it, but being able to also allow the body the process of healing, letting the
yes.
brain clear itself of the chemicals that build up from a process like you're talking about, moving the body. So there's necessary breaks there, even though you could go further and go what you also are aware that that can eventually go to it. That's why Wall Street guys
Mm.
who literally, these Wall Street guys I've worked before, if they will work till 11 o'clock at night.
Oh yeah. And
They
not
don't.
notice it.
What's that?
And not notice it.
Yeah. And then they get up early because they got a whole lot of pre-market
Right.
research to do. So some of them are getting 3.5, 4 hours sleep. They
Yeah.
don't even go back home. Most of them live, out a little bit. They have a place in Midtown or Lower Manhattan where they stay. And they 3 hours sleep, get up, start it again,
Do
and
all
go
of it.
in. A lot of them use cocaine and other stimulants to get through the
Yeah.
day.
That's
And
where it's starting to get dangerous.
yeah, and so you see that process. So it's just everything has a I believe that perspective sort of lets us know where we're going. Passion is great until passion is harmful, and that's with anything. I have to pull myself back on things. I have to not work out. I want to work out heavy every single day. I go to
Mm.
the gym every day, but 4 days a week I work out really hard with heavy weights. The other 3 days a week I do a lot of stretching, body weight
Mm.
exercises. That's part of the healing process. And when I was younger, I had more latitude in doing that, but I also noticed the fatigue nowadays if I don't allow for that healing process.
Yeah, which makes a lot of sense. This also gives a new meaning to the word preparation, what the topic of today's show is all about. Because most people, including myself, would think of preparation in terms of, okay, I'm preparing to go after this goal. What do I need? I got to get all this stuff together. Let's go do all that. But we're talking about a different kind of preparation here. We're in the midst of the battle, so to speak. We're in the midst of whatever activity is that we're doing, and we're preparing to take a break. That's a different kind of preparation from
It
what we
is.
normally think about, but it actually really does require preparation.
It does. It does. And that's the preparation has its place. It really does. Preparation is like, a lot of my clients, especially the younger males that are early 20s, they super disorganized brains. Their prefrontal cortex
Mm,
is, just slightly developed.
mm,
They're usually very smart, but they get stuck in the minutia. So one of the things that we work on is literally what is the next step.
mm.
Had a young man leave today. He needs to apply for a job at this company. I told him when you get to the parking lot, apply for the job. Then when he left my office, apply for the job. And he's put it off for 3 weeks. I said, so
Oh,
do
okay.
it. Don't waste it. He applied for the job.
Good for
Then
him.
we have the next step. We have the next step. But preparation is breaking down how you're going to be able to accomplish these goals. He's a really smart guy. He really wants to do all this, but he's way down the road and forgetting that first step.
And that first step, we're calling it preparation, but in real time, what it actually is preparation of the mindset. It,
Yes.
it isn't actually working out your plan and figuring out what steps you're going to take and so forth. I mean, certainly that can be part of it, but what you were describing was really setting the mindset so that when he got to that parking lot, he knew what he was going to do next because of the mindset, not because of what the plan was.
Well, and I may have mentioned this a few times, but I'm a big believer in fixing your mindset on a daily basis. So
Well,
you know,
this was kind of a softball, I have to admit. I was tossing it up there for you.
yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. So, your mindset is your responsibility. And
Mm,
so when you understand that you are in control of your mindset, you're control of so when you allow negativity or you allow being overwhelmed to come into your mindset, then the mindset is not about moving forward as much as just
mm,
sort of panic or whatever. And, every day adjusting your mindset for, to like, I look at Mondays, we talked about Mondays. I have a mindset that Mondays are the most productive day of the week. They usually are. Today had some stuff happen, but it wasn't bad. I mean,
mm.
nobody, it wasn't serious. And I love Mondays because, to me, Saturdays and Sundays are just slow. You know, I mean,
Mm.
they just, you get back into the workflow on Monday. There's more energy on Monday. And I have spent years creating that Monday mindset. I really have. It's so ingrained in my subconscious. Mondays excite me. It used to be Mondays scared the shit out of me, but Mondays excite me now.
Right, right. That's really the difference, isn't it?
Yeah.
We're talking because that's why you always like to post, not always, but you often like to post on Facebook and Instagram and so forth. You like to post about how much you love Mondays, how Mondays are your best friend and all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And most of your followers are already used to it, so they already know about it. But somebody who's seen it for the first time is saying, "Oh, what the hell is this guy talking about?"
Yeah, exactly.
But there's a reason why you're posting it, because it really is the best day of the week from your perspective, and that's so different from the way most people think about it.
And the one of the reasons I often do that, first of all, I want to reinforce my mindset, but secondary, you can do that with anything. So we always talk about accessing the subconscious mind. My fear of Mondays, or my hate of Mondays, or the dreading Mondays from the old day. I had this very chaotic life, and Mondays, the weekends were my only break. So Mondays is when the chaos started again. I had
Right.
a million things happening. I was so scared on Mondays. I hated to go to my office when I worked for my dad, because he might find out that $1 million is missing. That wouldn't have been a good day.
Yeah.
And so I was managing all that. So Sunday night I would lay in my bed and almost have a panic attack every Sunday night, just dreading what Mondays would bring.
Right.
And so I had subconsciously programmed I have programmed in my subconscious brain, where so many things take place, that Mondays are bad and to be scared of them. So for years after that, it hadn't worked for my dad in forever,
Right.
but I also noticed that I was still conditioned to dread Mondays.
Yeah.
And when I realized Mondays for my fellow weightlifters, that's International Chest Day. That's where everybody works chest on Mondays.
Oh, okay.
So I love working chest on Monday. That's what everybody all my friends do. So Mondays are exciting to me. They're day. I look at it entirely different. So I have literally switched the programming of my subconscious brain to welcoming Mondays. It's the day of action.
Right.
And so, but it can be done with anything that you're trying to change. You can reprogram that subconscious brain. And then once you do that, that becomes the default setting. By changing the brain to, I spent years deleting negative dialogue. I did that my entire life, very negative dialogue. And as you know, that was, even you and I first started talking, that was one of my battles of the internal dialogue. That I would hear. I don't have negative dialogue. I spend a lot of energy. I don't. It automatically, even if I have a moment where something, I just remind myself, like, what in the world am I? I just switch it right back. So it can't get in there anymore.
Right. Yeah. And certainly that kind of maintenance, shall we call it? That kind of maintenance is vital, because that maintenance is essentially, first of all, how you keep going, because that's part of your motto is, keep going, keep taking steps. But it's also how you maintain not just your mindset, but your mental health.
Yes.
That's how you maintain balance, so to speak.
Absolutely. But a mindset of gratitude. I talk about that a lot. It's not just some woo-woo, nice sounding gratitude thing.
Not at all. Yeah.
You know how I feel about that. It is. I have found that for me, and I only speak for me, I wasn't able to be sincerely grateful and depressed at the same time. They didn't coexist with me. So I understood one of my ways away from depression is to be sincerely, actively grateful for everything that I have. And I write, I'm on a streak now of, my goodness, 30 something years now of 5 things I'm grateful for every morning. I've never missed a day.
How long that's been going on. I mean, seriously, that's 30 years times 360. That's 10,000. I mean, that's 10,000 days.
Yeah, and I don't miss a day. I write 5 things I'm grateful for every morning. It's just conditioned to that. I look for in my worst days of my life since I got in recovery. On those days, I lost my son. I still wrote 5 things I was grateful for that day.
Yeah.
Because it's so I knew that morning in particular, I can't miss today.
Yeah.
I can't miss today, because I knew it was such a cornerstone to my mental health.
Right.
So being sincerely grateful, and it's not this sky, fake positivity. It's, I'm really grateful for the situation that I have now. I'm grateful for my health. I'm grateful for my success. And, you know, I'm not financially insecure anymore. Those are all things I just find incredibly happy to be living and to be able to have the life I have. And I still have normal days. People still cut me off in traffic. I mean, still,
Amazing.
yeah, I mean, so there's moments where, you know, I have to, you know, so obviously readjust, but the mindset of gratitude. So you get to reprogram your subconscious. So when you're born, your subconscious program it begins. And in the first 5 or 6 years of your life, it's really your parents and their belief system programming your subconscious brain for you. They're telling you facts. They're telling you what's good, what's wrong, what's this, what's that. They will unintentionally, I don't believe any parent ever does this in a bad way on purpose, but they unintentionally will also subconsciously implant their fears on you. And that becomes part of your subconscious programming. I've used the roller coaster example many times in my life. I was taught to fear roller coasters early in my childhood, and I sincerely was scared of this roller coaster until I was 13 and sort of put in a social situation where I had to ride one. And, you know, I'm a gigantic roller coaster fan now, but I had to really overcome that childhood programming.
Yeah, yeah. And it's important to do that. You know, as you were talking about that, I was reflecting back to something that's gone on in my life the last few days. I've been helping a friend. She's been going through some absolutely horrible back pain. And at one point, I think it was today actually, we were talking about strategies for how do you adjust your mindset in order to get where you want to get to and so forth. Because she's very much into the same kind of thing we talk about here. So it was a natural conversation to have. But I shared with her something that I've been using for a number of years. I think you've actually been using it too, about how do you accomplish something that most people would consider impossible or undesirable or whatever. And that something is, how do you appreciate what you don't like? And I'm going to share again what my particular approach is. This is my way of understanding it, and you can pile on any way you want to. But for me, it's like this. Let's say I'm going to make up a scenario. Let's say that I'm a dancer, right? So I'm a social dancer. And one of the things that I like about social dancing is meeting other people. I like the activity and so forth. But let's assume for the sake of discussion, by the way, this is not true, but assume for the sake of discussion that I really don't like asking somebody to dance. Okay. So it's a traumatic thing, right? And I have trouble facing it each time. Truth is, I've been doing it so long now, I can hardly wait. But we won't even go there. We'll pretend that it's still a social issue for me. So, all right, I have this fear of asking somebody to dance. And if I want to apply the formula of how do you appreciate something that you don't like, then what I would do in that scenario is ask myself, okay, well, I know I don't like asking somebody to dance. Is there anything in that I can appreciate? And literally by appreciate, I mean appreciate like, a house probably would appreciate. You bought a house for $100,000 and you sold it for $120,000, so it appreciated by $20,000. It's an actual increase in value that got associated with the house. So is there any way I can increase the value of this thing I don't like, which is asking somebody to dance? And inevitably, if I focus on that, the first few times I can't get there. I just can't get there. But if I stay with it, I can get to, well, there have been times when I asked somebody to dance and she said yes. Okay, well, that's a little bit better. I mean, it doesn't really offset the ones where she said no, but at least there's one or two in there. I can call that like a 5% increase. Well, that's an increase. That's an appreciation. And like I was explaining to my friend, it isn't that you want to tack that on to all the other experiences where somebody didn't agree to dance with you, or you're just afraid of it. You have all these times in your mind where you played that out. So those all count as the negatives too. It's that you want to take one of those times when you were focused on, she's not going to say yes, or she said no, or something like that, and in your mind replace it with the mental experience, or actually the physical experience of somebody saying yes, and then you get to actually dance with her. It's the replacement that makes all the difference, not tacking it onto the end. It's taking the thing that you consider negative and in your mind replacing it with the appreciated version of it.
Mm-hmm. That's perfectly said. That's, the idea that we take something and because the breaking it down from a little different angle, you started with, I love to dance.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're going to dance, you're going to have to ask people to dance.
Yeah.
So, either you decide I don't love dancing that much, or I am willing to adapt and figure out how to do this. So you want to dance enough to be able to ask. So you then you understand that part of the process. And and as you're saying, you've done it for so long right now. It's not even a thing that
Well,
would
yeah.
pop in your
But
mind.
I did actually, when I was first starting off, that actually was an issue for me. So that's why I thought of it.
Well, I'm sure. I mean, everybody. I would think that when I see somebody come in the gym for the very first time, you can tell they have, their eyes are big, they're looking around, and one of the things I've talked about for years. If I do recognize that, I go introduce myself, show them around, find a trainer to give them the instructions. Because I remember my first day walking in the gym, and I had people do that for me, and I can't imagine some 15-year-old kids never touched a weight, wants to get some muscle, walks in, and all this is going on. I can't imagine. I can, because I remember it, but it is something that I want to make sure that they get past that part. And once you get past that part, it's easy to come back.
Mm-hmm. And that's where the value of the replacement piece comes in. Do you agree with me? I mean, I literally like to emphasize the fact that we humans want to add on. We want to, okay, I've got all these negative experiences, but I want to add on a positive experience, as if that will balance. And to a certain extent, that will help. But I really think there's more value in when you're in one of those moments where you're experiencing the negative, finding a way to flip that over to the positive, rather than just tacking it on to the end.
I like reframing I call it reframing, and I like to reframe it to a positive. So I don't like to add on, and I'm not saying it has value. I could argue there's some value in that, but I like to just reframe the whole concept, to reframe it. Like I just said, I love to dance. I want to, so the act of me asking may have some weird feeling of rejection. She says, "Oh, but says, I want to dance. I want to ask enough so I get to be able to dance. And by the way, they're here to dance too. So there's
that
a good
actually
likelihood
helps,
of a yes."
Yeah. When you finally realize they're there to dance, it's funny how the human mind works, right? We're at a place where people are there for dancing, and somehow we get into our minds that they wouldn't want to dance with us. Like, what do you think they're there for? But we get that way. We actually block it that way.
Well, but again, fear of rejection is one of the biggest fears of humans built in. It gets back to the early childhood programming, and and so being able to take a situation and reframe it to match the narrative, or reframe it to because like I do with things, my worst days of my life, I reframe them to have become, other than the death of my son, I have reframed them into necessary days of my life. They were. I'm never going to make it exciting or good that I ate out of a trash can. But if that event didn't happen, a lot of things doesn't connect down the road. So it was a learning experience that is no longer considered a trauma. And I even go further. And I get a lot of pushback from this from some professionals, but I believe you can retroactively heal trauma by that concept. Me eating out of a trash can at one point was a severe trauma in my life. It really was. I never told anybody. And then later, when it had a weird positive effect in the relationship with my son, I totally reframed that, and it's no longer a trauma. It was an event that I feel was necessary for my connection with him years later.
Yeah. Well, I can understand why that would be controversial, and I can understand why many professionals would dismiss it. But I'm also, every time I'm thinking that thought, I'm also thinking to myself, it's almost like the professionals in those cases are cutting themselves off from an opportunity to flip a negative.
Yeah. Well, and I believe in that. And that sort of gets to my version, even though I do a life coaching model, my version of psychology is transpersonal psychology versus traditional psychology. We've done a show on Adler versus Freud and stuff like that.
We had a lot of fun with that one.
Yeah, that was great. So Adler was more of a transpersonal kind of a guy, and so the psychiatrists and therapists, psychologists over the years I've always admired have been in that camp. The Freud camp was more traditionally trauma-based and the other stuff that goes along with that. and that's the model that was basically accepted as the traditional model.
Oh,
Not
yeah.
critical of any of that. I'm just, you know, my feelings on it,
That's
but
just the fact. That's just the way it was.
yeah. So, you know, the idea that you can, you know, you can fix trauma doesn't mean you don't need to do the work, but your perspective on it is no longer me waking up in a nightmare thinking of me being homeless in Las Vegas. You have a trash can. It disappeared. Those events, it was gone because it was such a healing process
Mhm.
later in my life that it helped my son TJ. He wasn't my son at the time, but it's what connected my son and him. So I truly went from worst day of my life to, if that didn't happen, I wouldn't have the connection with this kid.
Yeah. That's a
And
big
I
deal.
literally it actually said a prayer and said I apologize because I was not real pleased back in the day,
Mm.
you know, with God or whatever power exists. And I later apologized. Said, yeah, that I'm, you know, didn't see it at the time, but I get it, appreciate it
Mhm.
because it was
Mhm.
necessary.
I want to touch a little bit more on that appreciation piece. One of my favorite ways to explain when I'm describing to people how to appreciate something you don't like is I remind myself I don't have to like it in order to appreciate it.
Yep.
And the first time I say that to myself, or the first time I say it to others, you know what it's like. If you've ever, I don't know if you ever use that phrase, but if you use that phrasing, people give you that cross-eyed look, like, "What the hell did you just say? It makes no sense whatsoever." And on the surface, it doesn't make any sense. But actually, it does make sense because it turns out you can appreciate anything. You don't have to like it in order to appreciate it. You can still appreciate it. And the best way I know of to explain that is, let's say, I'm not going to even come up with an example. I'm just going to come up with a score. So let's say there's something I dislike so much that I would rate it a minus 100. And then let's say I find a way to shift that to a minus 80. That's an appreciation. I still don't like the damn thing,
Right.
but I increase the value of it. So clearly, you actually can't appreciate something you don't like.
And you're going to think I'm being silly because it does involve baseball, but I'm actually serious in using this
Oh my
analogy.
goodness. Okay,
Yeah. So I'm not a fan of baseball.
I get that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I know you are. So, but that's not usually we kid each other. But this is, but I really appreciate the moments in baseball,
Hmm.
the incredible bottom of the ninth grand
Oh
slam.
yeah.
I mean, you know, it's there's few things more exciting or more riding on, or somebody making an incredible catch. I greatly appreciate components of the game.
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
don't appreciate the 72-hour games or the constant adjusting of testicles. I just don't appreciate that. So,
Spoiler warning to everybody: they don't actually last 72 hours. Just saying, but
in my ADHD world, they do. So, but you know, I do. So, but there's things I had in a sort of an adjacent topic. I had years ago. I took over. This company was failing, and you know, my sort of the consulting team that I have went in, and we were rebuilding the process. And there was a lady there that was very important to the operation. So I fired her boss, who she adored,
Mm.
and it was a necessary business move. And she literally hated me,
Mm.
but I needed her, and she was one of the best workers that I've ever seen.
Wow.
And she also hated me. I mean, bad. And you know, I didn't hate her, but she hated me. I didn't like her because of her attitude toward me, but I
Sure. Yeah,
really,
that's understandable.
really respected her work.
Right.
And so when the consulting thing and the company got sold, ended, I left. And on the way out, she gave me one of the best compliments that I ever had. She said, I didn't like you from day one, and I still don't, but you're the absolute best boss I've ever worked for.
Wow.
You were
Wow.
the only person I know that comes in. I was very rude to you early. You didn't blink. You still treated me professionally. And I said, you're one of the most efficient people I've ever worked with. We never made a good personal connection. I said, but the fact I respect you and your work ethic and all that you bring to this company, you're the most valuable person in this company. And
Mm.
And, I think we probably like each other now, to be honest with you. But
Good to hear. I'm glad to hear that. That's good.
yeah, she sends me birthday hellos, and I send her a
That's
birthday hello.
nice.
Yeah, but it wasn't good in the beginning. But there was never a moment that I didn't appreciate this incredible work she did. She was so organized and so on point, and we were able to operate, especially the first 6 months, where she really didn't like me and I really didn't like her. But I could sit down. We wouldn't have any fun conversations, but if I needed to go over 4 hours of spreadsheets with her, she sat right down, and we did it perfectly.
What we're describing here really is nuance. I just
Yes.
realized that,
Yes.
because most of the time we tend to evaluate things in terms of black and white. Either it's good or it's bad, it's right or it's wrong, it's good or it's evil, that kind of stuff. But here's a wonderful example, the one that you just gave, of how something can seem evil and still be good at the same time.
Yes.
Because she thought in many ways you were evil,
Sure.
at least in terms of your management style. But by the same token, she also recognized that what your management style was the best she'd ever experienced. It was both at the same time.
Well, yeah, and she acknowledged, the company was going to, she took it personally that I fired her boss, but he had to go, and the company had about a month left before it was going to implode if we didn't do what we did. So, we were able to sell. The company's very profitable. She and I also implemented the core group of people became, had vested interest. They got little pieces of ownership of the company. And she's one that did that was never done before. And so she was really appreciative. She said, we wouldn't be here without you coming in and doing this. And she said, so we have mutual admiration, but never particularly liked each other, personally or whatever. And just because of that rough start.
How cool that is, though, because it's almost better because you have such a great example there. It's better that she doesn't really like you all that much, and at the time you didn't like the way you're being treated either, because of the other piece of that, the part that made it an appreciation. I keep going back to that word appreciate, because we often equate the word appreciation with gratitude, and for good reason, because there's a lot of similarity between the two. But I always like to remind myself, appreciation is literally about increasing the value. And it's something we don't give a lot of conscious attention to, but value is attached to everything we do in life.
Absolutely. And that's
the whole thing right there. The fact that we attach so much value is where the opportunity is to use appreciation to our benefit.
Well, when you appreciate something you're grateful for, the energy toward that, that's where the value increases. So when you're really, when you also, on the other hand, when you take things for granted and you're not grateful for it, because I've seen people lose a lot when they weren't grateful for what they had, and people complaining. I work with, as you know, the group of the people I work with are wildly successful, rich. I don't know if successful as much as rich, but
interesting distinction, by the way. We could talk about that one.
Yeah. But these people, these are the billionaire class families, and I find it fascinating that they could, that they are not grateful for their mansion on the beach, or they're not grateful for this and not grateful for that. There's always something wrong, and you would think there would be a point where you can't have any more than these people have, and yet it's never enough, and they'll find something wrong with it. Or I need a new house. It's like, well, you just bought this one 6 months ago, and it's like.
Well, there's a point that you've made to me about this billionaire class, at least the portion that you've worked with in your practice, that has really stuck with me since the first time you said it. I think you said it about 3 or 4 years ago to me for the first time. You said that there were so many of these people who have been extremely successful, and yet if you ask them about it, they'll tell you they're as surprised as anybody that they were successful.
Yes.
It was the last thing they thought was going to happen, and it happened. And I'm thinking maybe that's one of the reasons why they don't appreciate, because they have trouble making the connection.
And maybe, but also I want to clarify, usually the one that makes it happen, it could be the mom or the dad or whoever, but the one that creates the company and wealth, or however they end up there, are the ones that are generally grateful. The ungrateful class are everybody underneath that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah,
It's just the
so
ones underneath it didn't actually do it themselves, and
they
so
didn't do
that's
it.
why
Yeah,
it was such a
yeah,
surprise.
and that's what drives everybody crazy. I mean, because the person that wakes up one day and has a net worth of over $1 billion and just had literally had gone 40 years grinding and worked and almost lost it a couple times and really came out on top. They're very grateful, and they usually are still very humble. Most of them are still humble. It's
But the ones who had it handed to them in some form,
they're never humble. They are the most entitled people you've ever met. They're complainers, and I just find it fascinating.
well, they're
And
also terrified, aren't they? Because they know that they have no idea how it happened, so they couldn't reproduce it.
yes,
So they're always afraid, what if we lose this?
yeah, yeah. And the man it's not always a man, but the person who made the sacrifice and worked so hard to get it there has no doubt they could do it again.
Mm-hmm.
Because so the other ones are just sitting there like, I saw a guy try to sue his trust fund because his sister had one had a 9,900 square foot home on the Atlantic Ocean. His sister had one that was 1,100 square feet bigger, and he wanted compensation for the difference.
That's mind-boggling.
Yeah, and the trust is like, what it's just an asset. They were baffled of why he of course he
Yeah.
couldn't do anything about it, but it was mainly just proving a point. It's like, and my involvement was, I just kept saying, I don't understand. What are you going to do with that? First of all, she had 4 kids. He had 1.
No.
But it still doesn't matter. You're talking about these gigantic
Yeah, right.
monstrosities.
Once you get past 5,000 square feet, like, who cares?
Yeah, on the Atlantic Ocean.
On the ocean, yeah.
Yeah, it's like but it was this fascinating mindset, because it was just it's constantly wanting more or not appreciating what you have. I have, there's also a whole concept that sort of is adjacent to this. Is one of the things that happens with people is, this has happened in business, it can happen in personal relationships, but when you start doing someone a favor or give somebody a gift or do something, and when for some people it becomes an entitlement. And when it becomes an entitlement, so what I used to do is, one of the companies I used to run, they had a tradition of they would buy lunch for the entire office, and very nice lunch, every Friday. And it's not a guaranteed built-in perk. It was just something they did out of appreciation.
Right.
And so it was, as they were we were looking at trying to reorganize the finances, the idea was we needed those things had to be cleaned out for a little while. I said, we're going to reinstate these at some point, but right now we got to cut. There's just a lot of waste here. And oh my gosh, you'd have thought, I'm going to quit if you don't pay for my lunch. So well, it's not, we eventually reinstated that, then made it part of the thing. But so when entitlement slips in, when you like, well, you've done that for me all this time, so you got to keep doing it for me. That's the problem. And the idea, I'm not opposed in any way of, we live in the richest country in the world. We shouldn't have a kid going to bed hungry. I'm not opposed to assistance for kids. I don't care if you should go. Nobody should go to bed hungry.
Absolutely.
Another point, I believe, probably disagree with a lot of people, we should not go to bed sick either. There should be a way of all that. So, but regardless of all that, but what I do see happen, people that get on disability, for example, when they really need it, they really need it. But the disability becomes a disability unto itself, because you can't look for a job, because you will lose. If you make too much money, you'll lose your disability. So the process, in a sense, they certainly need the money, but there needs to be a process that allows them to wean off of that, so they could take care of it. But it's like, I can't take that job because I will lose my disability. And so that becomes almost an impediment right there instead of a help.
Have you you've dealt with a lot of people who have issues like this one.
Yeah.
And it's pretty clear from what we've been describing here, there's a very fine line between the appreciation and the entitlement. I mean,
Yes.
there's a lot of overlap there, and so it can be a little bit confusing. Have you figured out when it slips from appreciation to entitlement? What have you figured out what the factor is or factors are that makes that happen?
I just think it's to answer your question, I can only speculate.
Okay, fair
I
enough.
don't have anything that I could put, no commonality. It's just the way it's served to you. It takes forever to get the disability. When
Mm,
you get it, it feels like you've accomplished something, and
mm,
then you're there, you're grateful for it. It comes in, but then it becomes like preserving the disability or getting additional disability. It's almost like it changes the perspective. So one of the things that I was trying to explain to a person one time was she was temporarily disabled, and she was getting better, and she was really fearful that she would get well and get off the disability.
mm.
And I was explaining to her, so you're a very smart lady. She got and disability is not a lot of money. It's a very
No,
small amount. I mean, something, I
but
think she got
pretty
like
minimal.
$1,200 a month or maybe
Something like
less.
that. Yeah.
And so I'm like, there's a lot of things you can do. So there was this program that I thought was a great program. This was down in South Carolina, of all places, where if you're on disability, you could go to school for free to learn to be a nurse
Mm,
or an imaging technologist or something, and it was
mm-hmm,
free.
mm-hmm.
And it was intended to eventually get people off of this, but it would
Right.
allow you to complete school and get into a living wage job. And she's like, well, I don't want to give up my disability. But I said, I get it, but do you understand that's how much you would make a week if you were
Mm,
working in one of these
mm.
careers, at least, versus an entire month? But her mindset was just stuck on that.
Yeah.
And it was sad. It was very debilitating. And so that always turned being on disability can become a disability.
That's a great way of expressing it. It is one of those things that is a little confusing. Like how can there be such a shift over from starting with it? Because you described, the person who's on that starts with an appreciation mindset and then slips into an entitlement mindset.
Yeah.
It's a form of dependency, really. I mean, it's similar to an addiction in that sense. In a way,
Well,
they become addicted to
I've
that.
had that happen in my life with somebody. I've had I had friends who over the years would borrow a little money here and there, whatever. And
Mm,
they always paid me back. And it's when it becomes an entitlement and
mm,
expectation is when I'm like, wait a minute, now I'm not going to loan you $500 every month, and then you pay me back and then get borrowed again. That's you know, basically I'm giving you $500. You're just giving it back, and so it's just constantly rotating. And
mm,
so I don't mind helping somebody who's a friend doing a little bit, but if it has a potential to become an entitlement, I cut it off. And I used to do things for neighbors and stuff, and then when it wasn't appreciated or reciprocated, I would cut it off. And oh my goodness, you'd have thought I'm like, wait, I was just doing that to be helpful, not to be dependent.
I want to pose a question to you, and we're running out of time, so maybe it's the last question of the conversation. But the question I want to pose to you is this: if we didn't live in a society where we each had to make sure we had enough money coming in to put roofs over our heads, food on the table, clothing on our backs, that kind of thing. If we didn't live in a society like that, would there still be an entitlement situation? Would there still be a situation where people are basically addicted to entitlement?
Me and maybe I have a biased view because of the people I work with and the experience I have.
Fair enough.
I think human nature would still have it. I really do. I just think
Mm,
uh, there is something about that. One of the reasons, on paper, communism or socialism works pretty well.
mm,
On paper,
on paper.
uh, but it's you also have people that you know. Here's a government job, and I'm not critical of government job. They usually, if I were to go into any government agency, they probably have four people doing one person's job across the board.
Mm, yeah.
because it's so. If you ever and I'm not critical of any one group, but I was at DMV with Justin on this weird thing we have going on one of his cars, and I'm watching the DMV people. They're terrible job, by the way, and I get it, but they're moving incredibly slow.
Yeah.
There's no urgent. They could, if they got moving, they could really knock it out quick. But there's no incentive to make it go fast.
Well, let me throw another concept at you. I think that there are people who end up in that situation, and they end up in the situation acting that way because they're doing something that they don't love.
Yes.
There's no fun in it for them at all.
Well, then, and that's the point. I'm with it. I when I say that, I'm not being critical in the sense that, you know, that's what I'm observing. I would not be motivated personally. I'm the most motivated person in the world, but I'm not going to be motivated, especially if I'm looking around at everybody else phoning it in and going slow. I got to get to 5 o'clock. I just got to get to 5 o'clock. And
that would be debilitating for sure.
Yeah, and what a horrible way to live. I mean, it's just to go home from that and do that. So it's not a. It's when I often talk about, you know, finding passion in what you do and figure out all that stuff. That's fantastic, but those jobs, it's hard to find that passion. And now you might find other passions outside of work that if you can mindset yourself into, I'm doing this so I can pursue my other passions, that's fine. But when you go to work at, like, I've worked with a couple of executives, our electric company in Virginia is Dominion Energy. They're a gigantic company that just recently sold. And I worked some high up executives in Dominion.
Okay.
They make really good money.
Yeah.
But the job at this point is just obnoxious. They have to be there. It's not exciting. There's no purpose to it. They don't even really do work per se. They have meetings. But they have to just run out the clock to get that full retirement. So they're really miserable the last 2 or 3 years there. They're just miserable. But yet they have to run out the clock to get the money and the fully vested in all that stuff. So it's you don't get that passionate life. So one of the things that I sort of agree with the Japanese on the sort of the ikigai concept, you know, if you ever do, the ultimate lottery in life is not the lottery, is finding a way to make a good living doing what you're passionate about and love. That's the gift right there, because that's why I love my job. I wouldn't be able to maintain. And when I say, you know, me, I always talk about I will never retire. I'll just keep going. If I were working at DMV or Dominion, I would definitely be counting the days.
I would have retired yesterday. Yeah.
Yeah. As soon as they said I could retire, I'd be done. Like, hell yeah. You know?
Yeah. Exactly.
So, but a lot of it is that. So it ended up being a really good topic today.
It did. It is a good topic, and we may even carry on this last bit another show, because this is very personal to me. As you know, I struggled for the longest time trying to figure out what my passion in life was.
Right.
And specifically in regard to what I was going to do for a living and what I was doing for a living, because I didn't like what I was doing. I didn't like where I was going. I didn't like the results I didn't like anything about it, really. And every time I looked at the question of, well, okay, what is my passion? First of all, I didn't know what the passion was. Second, if I could come up with a passion, I couldn't figure out a way to make money off of it. You know, it's a problem. It's a big challenge. I can see how that could stump a lot of people. It stumped me for a lot of years. I finally found my way through it, but I mean, this is something that people get affected by daily.
When you bring that passion and people realize you have the passion. A real quick story. It's funny, the other day. So I was in court with a client.
Okay.
And it's juvenile court. So I never lose in juvenile court ever. And so, you know, and I'm not saying that arrogantly. It's what I mean by that, juvenile court's intended for rehabilitation, not punishment. Right. So it's not me, it's just that's the way it works.
The nature of it, yeah.
Yeah, so we were there, and so the judge, who I know very well, I've been probably 200 cases in his courtroom. He's never ruled against me or my client. And so we were discussing this point. The prosecutor was looking for detention for this kid, and the judge, and I started talking. He goes, "Mr. Elson, I have a headache. If I just dismiss these charges, will that avoid a 30-minute lecture from you?" And I said, Your
that's
Honor,
wonderful.
I have one prepared. He goes, case dismissed. It was one of the coolest things. He knew I was going to bring all that passion and that energy, and he's like, "I'm just not into that today." And I'm still going to agree with him, but just let's don't listen to it.
That is great. That's a great way to end the show. I like that.
Yeah, that was a funny one. He's a great guy.
Well, thank you very much. And we took Jen's topic, we expanded on it, we turned it into something really good. So I agree with you. This is a good show. Thank you very
All
much.
right. See you next week.
All right. Thank you to our podcast listeners everywhere. We'll see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.